who were not in school were mainly girls, amounting to 61.6 million, which is 53% of the global figure. In sub-Saharan Africa, 45 million of school-going age children were not in school, while South Asia accounted for 42 million of the 115 million children who were not in school in the year 2000. However, by 2019, the number of out-of-school children had dropped to 36 million, having managed to get only 9 million in schools. Amongst the reasons for low school enrollment, especially in the underprivileged areas, of which the sub-Saharan Africa can be considered as one, the reasons were mainly religious beliefs, cultural and social beliefs, and poverty, as in many other countries, including the Gambia. The religious beliefs were that conventional education was unholy and sinful. It was not religious. Culturally and socially, girls' education was seen as a taboo. That schools were not safe place for girls, as less than 5% of teachers were females, and the majority of teachers at that time were male. Sorry about that disconnection. I'm sorry about the disconnection.
And now you are good. You can go ahead. Yeah.
I'll continue.
Yeah.
As I was saying, schools were considered not safe for girls, as there were very few female teachers around our schools who could have kept an eye on the girls for their safety and security. And it was a belief that girls' education was not important, and that the place of the girl child was in the home, and were supposed to be married and to take care of their husbands and children. While for a good many others, it was poverty, as parents could not afford the tuition fees, the uniforms, the books, and the other requirements for schools. Whilst in the Middle East, North Africa, South Asia, West and Central Africa, girls formed the majority of out of school. In East Asia, the Pacific, Latin America, and the Caribbean, more boys than girls were out of school. Hence, educators in Africa, especially those in sub-Saharan Africa, developed policies, brought about reforms and strategies, with support from partners such as the World Bank, UNICEF, and many other development partners to campaign for and to promote the Education for All agenda. In the Gambia, lower basic or primary school enrollment was only 181,835 children in the year 2000, rising to 227,668 in 2010, with an annual growth rate of 2% and a ratio of 78 to 79% for boys and girls, the majority of whom were in the urban areas, as opposed to the rural or the underprivileged areas, where the religious, cultural, and social beliefs were stronger and poverty was highest. So began the campaign for school enrollment for both boys and girls, with programs like the Child-Friendly Schools and later the Girl-Friendly Schools program. With support again in the Gambia, we got a lot of support from UNICEF to promote the Education for All agenda, and particularly the education of girls. There were also local partners or collaborators, like the Forum for African Women Educationalists, whose headquarters is in Nairobi, Kenya. The Gambia chapter, FAWIGAM, who collaborated with the Ministry of Basic and Secondary Education to promote access to education and empowerment of women through literacy and social economic empowerment for rural women. All these brought about the increase in access to education and increase in enrollment, not only in the Gambia, but in all other countries in the Africa region and beyond. Mr. Moderator, participants, it should be noted that a range of activities were undertaken through advocacy, sensitization, and awareness creation. In the Gambia, the religious and community leaders were the first to be targeted. They were orientated to understand and accept the importance of education, especially that of girls, for their self-development, and to prepare them for their contribution to national development. We then went on to sensitize the parents, especially the mothers, who were mostly the ones who resisted or were very resistant to allowing their girl children to be enrolled in schools, since they themselves were not privileged to go to school. They wanted to keep the girls at home, to help them with the household and domestic chores, and to wait for marriage. The mothers were then organized into clubs, which we called mothers' clubs. And they were provided with labor-saving devices so that they could release the girls for schooling. The mothers' clubs were also introduced to literacy classes and income generation activities to support the education of their female children in case the fathers were not able to provide the school requirements for both the male and female children, And the girls were usually, or would usually be the ones to be kept back from being enrolled or be withdrawn from school. Since our societies are mainly patriarchal. When it comes to deciding who would be allowed to go to school to acquire education in those days, it was usually the girls who were at a disadvantage, as it was believed that the boys would be the ones to be in charge of the families, and the girls would be married into families and they will be taken care of. We had to make the communities, to make the parents understand that all these were just myths and perhaps old-fashioned cultural beliefs. And in the 20th century, there was no place for such beliefs. To enhance access, many innovative strategies were employed over the years. Among those strategies were, one, to declare free education by government, first at the primary or the lower basic school level. And now, that is the case at all levels of education in the Gambia. Children in the Gambia can go to school from the age of 3 at ECD level up to the age of 18 when they complete the school cycle, and they are not expected to pay tuition fees in government and public schools. It's only in the private schools that fees are paid in the Gambia now. They were also provided with free textbooks, as that could also be a reason for children staying out of school. Or child of school-going age in the Gambia from grade 1, primary level, to upper basic level, which is grade 9, are supplied with a free set of textbooks. Those are the core textbooks. They do not have to pay for them. And in the senior schools, when students are enrolled in grade 10, they are given $2,000 each, which are paid to the schools so that they could get textbooks for the senior school students. So students do not pay school fees, neither do they have to buy or pay for their own textbooks. The distance to school was also reduced, as that could have been another hurdle for children accessing education. And the distance to school had to be reduced for schools that were more than 3 kilometers from their communities, so that they will be able to access the schools easily. And to do that, a lot of new schools were established in difficult or hard to reach areas, communities that had no primary schools or low basic schools, as we call them here in the Gambia. For those in the upper and senior schools, most of the students who stayed far from their schools, perhaps more than 5 kilometers away from their schools, were supplied with bicycles so that they will be able to get to their schools easily and quicker. For those communities where, because of numbers, we could not build schools, small communities that may not be sustainable, customized donkey carts were provided for the children to ferry them to their schools or the nearest schools from their communities and take them back home. School meals were also provided, because we came to realize or studies have also proven that in communities or in schools where there were school meals, it was an attraction for children to be enrolled in schools. And now, with support from the World Bank, uniforms, shoes, textbooks, stationery, and school meals are provided for students who are in very hard to reach areas and underprivileged communities where enrollments were very, very low. And we still have a few out-of-school children. So to attract them to school or to enhance their enrollment, we had to provide those school needs for them, their uniforms, their books, their stationery, and school means to attract them so that they will be enrolled. And we're making very great inroads in those areas. We had to also endeavor to increase the ratio of female teachers at all the levels of our schooling in this country, in the Gambia, to help to provide security for girls so that those teachers can also serve as role models for them. And their parents will be more convinced that their children will be secured in the schools. We did not stop at that, but we had to remove all hidden costs of education and make education, like I said, tuition free, and provide textbooks to all children, which are up to grade 12, which is the end of the school cycle. All these have gone far and have helped to increase access to education and to improve participation and enrollment. What are the successes that have been registered? With all the different strategies employed, all the efforts that were made, and all the support that we got from development partners. A lot of successes were registered. And with all the above reforms and interventions, a lot of gains have been realized. And education is now expanded in the Gambia, like in many other countries in Africa and in our sub-region. There is now a demand for education. Parents are now demanding that their children are educated. And they're given a choice. They're given a choice to decide between religious madrasa education or the conventional type of education. Whatever their choice was, they're given an opportunity to be able to access education, whether it's a conventional type of education or is the religious madrasa schools. In communities where there are no schools, it's even the parents who will come forward now to ask for schools in their communities because they want their children to be educated. They've seen the benefits that education has on the lives of individuals. There is now an increased school enrollment at all levels of education, from the primary level to the upper basic level to senior secondary schools. Schools are now more accessible than they used to be. Like I said, in communities where there were no lower basic schools, we have established lower basic schools to create access. And in those communities with lower basic schools, where the nearest upper basic school was more than 5 kilometers, those lower basic schools were expanded to include upper basic level. And in some cases, even to include a senior secondary level. So we have communities in the Gambia where we have schools running from ECD, which is Early Childhood Development Centers, to lower basic schools, grade 1 to 6, continuing to upper basic, grade 7 to 9, and even to include a senior secondary level, which is grade 10 to 12. We do have a few communities in the Gambia where you will find schools running from ECD level right up to senior secondary level. All this is in an effort to make education more accessible, because we want to discourage dropouts. When schools are far from communities, it encourages dropouts. Children would drop out from one level to the next level because they find it very difficult to access the next level. So in such communities, we give them all the levels of education. Girls' enrollment has increased at all the different levels, surpassing that of boys, especially at the primary or lower basic, as we call it, and at par with the seniors in the senior secondary schools. We find communities where the ratio of boys is the same as that of girls. So we can see that a lot of improvement has taken place in the education of girls. Retention and performance of girls has also improved. As we have seen instances, and in certain schools or communities or regions, because we do look at the regional disparities, and we have seen regions, and some hard to reach regions, some underprivileged regions, some difficult to reach regions, where there are schools there that are doing very well, performing very well. And we have had instances where we had more girls coming out with very impressive results at the grade 9 examination than the boys. The education budget has also been increased, and the education budget in the Gambia is one of the highest among all the other ministries. All these efforts, policies, and strategies have resulted in an enrollment increase at not only the lower basic or primary school level, but at all other levels. But we want to look at the lower basic school level, because that is where the entrance takes place, and that's where we try to sustain and make sure that we have retention taking place and students moving from one level to the other. So for primary school level, in 2021, as opposed to the year 2000, where we had less than 200,000 children at the lower basic level, we now have 401,333 which is almost a 250% increase, 20 years on from when we started the Education for All campaign and the girls' education promotion. And this is a ratio, has a ratio of 53% and 47% in favor of girls. So you can see that in our lower basic schools or at our primary school level, we have more girls than boys at that level, 53% to 47%. Nonetheless, it's a moderator over the years, 20 years on, from when Education for All was declared, we still have some challenges. It's never perfect, and there is always room for improvement. Rural-urban disparities still remain in enrollment. We still have it in retention and even in performance. That's one challenge. We still have the rural-urban disparities, which we're trying to work on. The ever-increasing enrollment to classroom space in our schools is also a challenge. With a vigorous campaign and the promotion of education, the enrollment continues to increase. And in some of our schools, classroom space is becoming a problem. But with the help of partners again, like MRC Holland Foundation, over 3,000 classrooms have been built. And among those 3,000, some of them have been rehabilitated to provide more space and to make the school environment more conducive. We also have a challenge of large schools and large class sizes, especially in the urban areas and the population growth centers. So we have large schools, and sometimes when those schools get to over 3,000 children in the school, we have to annex them. But in the urban area and in the growth centers, sometimes it's an issue to have land to annex our schools. But what we do, we build upwards, story buildings, so that we can have more classroom spaces. And where the class sizes are large, when we have more space, then we divide the classes. Nonetheless, let's remember that COVID also had its own challenges, and with the issue of social distancing in our classrooms, where we used to have about 50 children in a class, because of COVID, we had to reduce those class sizes. And we were keeping about not more than 30 children in a class. So the other 20, we had to look for space for them. So the challenge of space still remains. Teacher numbers is also a problem. And the teacher numbers is not matching with the enrollment increase at all levels. So teacher supply in some areas, not all areas, but in some areas, particularly in the growth areas, is a challenge. Another challenge is the need for more teaching, learning resources, especially to keep trends with the demands of the 21st century technological education, which we refer to as EdTech. We have a challenge, and there is need for technological infrastructure in our schools, and that is internet connectivity, computers, tablets, and other technological equipments to be able to use for teaching and learning purposes. Capacity building for teachers to improve their competencies as 21st century educators is also a challenge. Notwithstanding, Mr. Moderator, with all this, we are continuing to push in the Gambia, and we will not relent until we have the last school-age child in our classroom, as we have no intention of leaving any child behind in fulfillment of the fourth Sustainable Development Goal, which is the theme of the Gambia's current education policy. I thank you for your kind attention, and I hope I have been able to share some insights with you into how the Gambia has emerged in providing education to the children living in the Gambia 20 years on from the Declaration of Education for All in the year 2000 to this point. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Your Honor. Thank you very much. It was a very enlightening webinar. We have learned a lot. So is there any question for Her Excellency from our audience? Okay, yes, we have one from Ahmed Fathi. So, and his question is, how can we ensure the quality of education? And what are the challenges like the teachers face at school? And also, like, what is the role of NGOs such as Educator with No Borders can do in promoting such education?
Thank you very much. The challenge of quality education. Quality is always a challenge. It's always difficult to reach. But nonetheless, we're doing our best. And to provide quality education, we first of all will have to build the competencies of our teachers. Like I mentioned, that's a challenge, capacity building for teachers. We have to build their capacities so that they're in line with the demands of the 21st century in developing children's competences. So it says, where you must have quality education, you should have quality teachers. Without a good quality of teachers, you cannot have quality education. So we are building the competencies of teachers to be able to provide the education that the children need in the 21st century. And here we continue to look out for support from partners, from NGOs. And my ministry, we don't have any collaboration with Education Without Borders. And perhaps this could be the starting point of our relationship, the starting point of our collaboration, where we can have Education Without Borders coming on board to partner with us to be able to provide quality education for the children. Thank you very much.
Yes. And Your Excellency, we have another question, and that is from your own experience as a very successful educator and a leader in education. What do we need to maintain such sustainability of education system, not only in Gambia, but also in other countries with similar situations?
What we need is continued support. If we have the support, we will be able to sustain. I think it's important to note here that the Gambia is a developing country with very limited resources. In fact, the only resource that we have in the Gambia is the people. Yes. The people are our greatest resource. And if we develop the people, then we will be able to develop the country. So, and the first step to developing the human resource of this country is through education. And we want to provide the best type of education for the Gambian children, or for all children living in the Gambia. But as I said, the resources are limited, and partners and sympathizers, philanthropists are encouraged to see how they can partner with the Gambia to help us to provide quality education that will be helpful, useful to the people of the Gambia for their national development.
Thank you very much. Any further questions? Yes, Your Excellency, we have one more question. So, you have mentioned that one of the obstacles in promoting education is this patriarchal society myth. It may not be true, but it can be like a myth that is very well spread among population, especially in a rural area. And do you think that by providing access to TV and, for example, TV and internet, this myth can be busted? Can this be like a good way of busting this myth?
Well, we're making inroads into that, because what we talk about now, we're trying to promote and teach about gender equality.
Yes.
Letting or sensitizing and creating awareness among the rural people in particular, that gender issues are very important for our development and for our growth, and that women are as important as men are. And we all have competencies, we all have abilities that if the men and the women bring their abilities together, a lot could be achieved. We have been educating the communities, we have been educating even the children in our schools, in our classrooms, to understand gender issues and to be able to understand that gender issues are very important for development and men and women working together, and for them to understand that every human being has a right and those rights must be fulfilled. So even in our schools, we teach about rights, we teach about gender issues. And we are trying to break those barriers gradually. It is not something that will go away too soon. No. I am sure we will get there, because we have attained, we have made a lot of improvements. And the fact that we've been able at the primary level to get more girls than boys in our schools or in our classrooms means that the communities, the rural people, are beginning to understand that education is a right and it's about gender equality.
Yes, thank you, thank you. Yes, do we have more questions? Yes, we have.
Thanks for the wonderful opportunity. Guys from Egypt, I wanted to ask about unique program. Yes, somebody from Egypt is asking about a unique program. I don't really understand the question and what the person means by unique program. Perhaps if I can have a little elaboration, I should be able to respond adequately.
Can I ask him here? Thanks for your lecture. I am very happy to be with you, and I wanted to ask about the local program in Gambia and how you are supported women and children to keep on continuous learning education system. I think the local program in Gambia is a unique program for supporting women and children in this country. I was asking about the more details about the activities to how you supporting women, because the women in the Africa is need cooperative system for supporting them, especially they worked all the time with men and for the economical issues. If you can give me some details about this program in Gambia, I was very happy for this opportunity. Thank you, His Excellencies.
Thank you very much. Indeed, I do understand. I know that the Mothers Club program is a unique one to the Gambia. And quite a few people have come to the Gambia to learn more about the Mothers Clubs and how we use the Mothers Club as an avenue to support and to promote girls' education. You are invited to the Gambia and you can come and learn from us. When we started the girls' education campaign, I would say I was one of those people who was involved in the girls' education campaign at that time. We went to communities to talk about getting girls into schools, because in those years, 2000 and later, up to about 2005, girls' education participation of girls in education was quite low for cultural beliefs, and two, we were told by the people, by the communities, especially the mothers, that they needed their girls at home to help with the domestic chores, and they could not release them to go to school. One, they needed the girls to help with the cleaning and cooking and sweeping at home. Two, they needed the girls to fetch water. Three, they needed the girls to fetch firewood for the cooking, etc., etc., etc. And we agreed with them that we would provide labor-saving devices like improved cooking stoves, milling machines to help with the preparation of the cereals for the food, and also to, yes, we gave them milling machines, we gave them fuel-saving devices, and we also had to provide water supply within their communities so that they wouldn't have, the mothers would not have to go far to fetch water. When we provided all those, then there was no need to keep the girls at home so much. And we were able to get the girls to be enrolled in schools because the mothers were somehow comfortable that the domestic chores, the level or intensity of the domestic chores at home has been reduced. They could easily get water from their communities nearby. They could get less firewood that they needed for the cooking. And they had the milling machines for the pounding of the cereals and the milling of all the different cereals to prepare their food. So that's how we got these girls. They were enrolled. The next thing was that, like I said, sometimes because there were school fees to be paid, uniforms to be bought, sometimes it was difficult on the fathers who were the breadwinners to provide for all the children, both male and female. And so we provided seed money for the parents, for the mothers, for income generation. And from the income they got, they were able to support their girl child where the fathers were not able to and thought they could only support the boys. So where the father had said, oh, I cannot do all the children, I can't help all the children, I'm only going to support the boys to acquire education, the mothers would come on and say, well, I will be able to take care of my girl child. And we also provided literacy for them so that they'll be able to, one, appreciate the importance of being literate, because we believe that where you have a literate mother, that mother would do all she can to make sure that her girl children, her female children, are also provided with education. So these were the different strategies, the different ways to get the girls from them into schools, and also to get them to support the education of their female children. But like I said, you are invited to the Gambia, you can come and learn more about our mothers' clubs.
Yes, Your Excellency. Thank you. And we have two questions. One from Mahra Saeed. And her question is, from your best estimate and point of view, how much time does Gambia need to develop this education system if all the needs are met? Under a condition, like a very conditional.
Well, we may not have a lot of time because they will come.
Some connection issue. Okay, just
current policy 2030, and which is the end of the SDGs. So now up to 2030, which is the aims than we have right now. And we want to have been able to attain, perhaps fully all the SDG goals.
And Dr. Chai, I see you have a question too.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency Claudiana. As a policymaker for education and as yourself as an excellent education practitioner, I think your insight about teachers, students, and teaching, learning in underprivileged zones has a lot of implications and even can serve as good models and examples for others to follow. I want to still little nail down the tough questions a little bit. So we know the teachers, students, and even parents in underprivileged zones like war zones, refugee camps, poor areas worldwide, they need our attention. That's why this organization, which hosting this webinar today, Educators Without Borders, they are really pushing for this effort. I want to know that, based on your experience as educators and as a policymaker, like who should be more responsible for giving the education provision and access for underprivileged zones, for teachers and students alike in those zones? I mean, if it's a government or it's NGO like Educators Without Borders, or it's charity organizations, or it's the United Nations, because this underprivileged zones, apparently they don't have very effective government there. So somebody else need to help them. So who should play a bigger role, or who can play a bigger role? And if they play, and what is the priority thing they should do?
Well, the provision of education for any country is the government's responsibility. So the government should take the lead role, but the government cannot do it alone in most cases. And the government would look for partners to support, to collaborate with, to help so that they could achieve their goals. And here in the Gambia, the government is taking its lead. The government takes its lead as the sole provider, or the one that is responsible to provide education for its citizens. But nonetheless, we also welcome partners and collaborators to help us, to give us support to be able to achieve or attain the objectives that we have set for ourselves as government. We take the lead as government, but notwithstanding, we ask people to walk the walk with us. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency.
Yes, so any further questions? Okay, yes, then thank you very much, Your Excellency, for your time and effort for today's presentation. It was truly very enlightening.
You're welcome. It is my pleasure. Thank you very much. You're most welcome. And I thank you for giving me the opportunity to share my experiences with you. Thank you, and have a good day.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Have a great day.
Take care. Keep safe.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Recording stopped.